My name is Avalon Reed. And this is the story of how one cruel laugh changed everything. The fluorescent lights of Jefferson High flickered above me as I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting the delicate lavender fabric that hugged my 17-year-old frame. Tonight was prom night, and I was about to step into a world where I had never truly belonged. The dress? Oh, this dress. It was not what my classmates expected. While they had spent hundreds, sometimes thousands, on designer gowns from boutiques downtown, I had spent 3 hours scouring through racks at Second Chance's thrift store. But when I found this dress, hidden between a polyester blazer and a stained wedding gown, something magical happened. The soft lavender chiffon seemed to whisper to me, begging me to see its potential. I took it home, spent every evening that week carefully mending the tiny tear near the shoulder, hand-washing it with gentle detergent, pressing it with my mother's old iron until it looked almost new. Avalon, sweetheart. My mother's voice drifted through the thin apartment walls. You look absolutely beautiful. I turned to see her standing in the doorway, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Mom worked 3 jobs just to keep our little apartment, and I knew she felt guilty about not being able to buy me the kind of dress my classmates would be wearing. Mom, do not cry, I whispered, walking over to embrace her. This dress is perfect. It has character, history, stories to tell. She squeezed me tight, and I could feel her shoulders shaking slightly. I just wish I could give you more. You have given me everything that matters, I said firmly, pulling back to look into her tired but loving eyes. You taught me that beauty comes from within, that creativity matters more than money, and that we can make something extraordinary out of anything. The doorbell rang, and my heart skipped a beat. My date, Marcus Chun, was here. He was not the most popular boy in school, but he was kind, and he had asked me with such genuine sweetness that I could not say no. I opened the door to find Marcus standing there in a rented tuxedo, his eyes widening as he took in my appearance. Avalon, he breathed. You look incredible. For a moment, I felt beautiful, truly beautiful. The ride to the Riverside Hotel ballroom was filled with nervous chatter, but as we pulled up to the entrance, I felt my confidence begin to waver. Through the glass doors, I could see my classmates in their stunning gowns, designer shoes sparkling under the crystal chandeliers. Ready? Marcus asked, offering me his arm. I took a deep breath, lifted my chin, and stepped into the lion's den. The ballroom was magnificent, all gold and cream, with fresh flowers adorning every table. The music was soft and romantic, and couples were already swaying on the dance floor. For the first 10 minutes, everything was perfect. Marcus and I found our table, chatted with some friendly classmates, and I actually began to relax. Then I heard the voice that would haunt me for years to come. Oh my God, is that Avalon Reed? I turned to see Lydia Blackwood approaching, her emerald green designer gown trailing behind her like liquid silk. Lydia was everything I was not: wealthy, popular, cruel when it suited her. She was surrounded by her usual entourage: Madison Torres, Brianna Lee, and Catherine Wells, all of them wearing gowns that probably cost more than my family's monthly rent. That dress, Lydia continued, her voice dripping with false sweetness. It is so unique. I felt the familiar knot forming in my stomach, but I forced a smile. Thank you. I think it is quite lovely. Lydia stepped closer, circling me like a predator. Where did you get it? It looks so familiar. The conversation around us began to quiet, other students turning to watch what was unfolding. I found it at a wonderful little shop downtown, I said carefully, trying to keep my voice steady. A shop. Lydia's eyebrows shot up, and I could see the gleam in her eyes. She had smelled blood in the water. What kind of shop? The silence was deafening now. Even the music seemed to fade into the background. A thrift store, I whispered, immediately regretting my honesty. The laughter started small, just a snicker from Madison. Then Brianna joined in, followed by Catherine. And then, like a disease, it spread throughout the ballroom. A thrift store. Lydia practically shrieked, her voice carrying over the music. Oh, sweetheart, that is not vintage. That is charity. The words hit me like physical blows. I felt my cheeks burning, my hands trembling, my carefully constructed confidence crumbling like a house of cards. I mean, Lydia continued, clearly enjoying her audience. I suppose it is sweet that you tried. But honey, this is prom, not a costume party for the less fortunate. More laughter, louder now, meaner. I could see phones being pulled out, recording my humiliation for posterity. Did someone die in that dress? Catherine called out, causing another wave of cruel amusement. Maybe we should start a collection for Avalon, Madison added. Get her something from this decade. I stood there, frozen, as the laughter washed over me like acid rain. Marcus reached for my hand, his face red with anger and embarrassment. But I pulled away. I would not let them see me cry. I would not give them that satisfaction. Instead, I lifted my chin, straightened my shoulders, and looked Lydia directly in the eyes. You know what? I said, my voice surprisingly steady. You are absolutely right. This dress is second-hand. It has been worn before, loved before, danced in before, and that makes it special. It has stories, memories, character, something your overpriced dress will never have. The laughter faltered slightly, but Lydia was not done. How noble of you, Avalon, making poverty sound poetic. But at the end of the day, you are still wearing someone else's leftovers. That was the moment. That was when something inside me snapped, not into pieces, but into place, like a puzzle finally finding its missing piece. I smiled, genuinely smiled, for the first time that evening. You are absolutely right, Lydia. I am wearing someone else's story, and someday, when I am creating stories for others to wear, you will remember this moment. You will remember the girl in the second-hand dress, and you will wish you had been kinder. Without another word, I turned and walked out of that ballroom. Marcus followed me, calling my name, but I needed to be alone with my thoughts. I sat in the hotel parking lot, still in my lavender dress, and made myself a promise that would change everything. One day, I whispered to the stars above, this will not just be my story, it will be theirs too, and they will regret every single laugh. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I had never experienced before. While my classmates were nursing hangovers and posting prom photos, I was sketching. I drew dress after dress, each one inspired by the beauty I saw in forgotten things. Vintage buttons, antique lace, fabrics with histories and souls. I threw myself into my studies with a passion that surprised everyone, including myself. I researched fashion history, studied the great designers, learned about sustainable fashion before it was even a trend. During my senior year, while other students were focused on parties and popularity, I was teaching myself to sew. I bought a second-hand sewing machine from the same thrift store where I had found my prom dress, and I practiced until my fingers were raw and bleeding. My mother found me one night at 3 a.m, hunched over the machine, working on a jacket I was reconstructing from 3 different vintage pieces. Avalon, you need to sleep. I cannot sleep, I replied, not looking up from my work. I have too much to create. She sat down beside me, watching as I carefully attached a section of 1960s brocade to a 1980s blazer frame. This is about prom night, is it not? I finally looked up, meeting her concerned gaze. It is about everything, Mom. It is about showing the world that beauty does not come with a price tag, that creativity matters more than credit cards, that the things other people throw away can be transformed into something extraordinary. She reached over and touched the fabric I was working with, feeling its weight and texture. You know, your grandmother was a seamstress during the war. She could make a ball gown out of curtains and a tablecloth. Tell me about her. And she did. For the next 2 hours, as I worked, my mother told me stories of my grandmother Rosalie, who had created wedding dresses from parachute silk, who had made children's clothes from their father's old shirts, who had believed that necessity was the mother of invention. She would be so proud of you, Mom whispered as dawn began to break through our small apartment window. Those words became my fuel. I graduated valedictorian, shocking everyone who had written me off as the girl in the thrift store dress. I received a full scholarship to the Fashion Institute of Design. And I left Jefferson High behind without looking back. College was a different world entirely. Here, my thrift store aesthetic was not just accepted, it was celebrated. My professors praised my innovative use of recycled materials, my ability to see potential in the discarded and forgotten. But it was not easy. While my classmates came from families who could afford the best fabrics, the latest equipment, the most expensive internships, I was still shopping at thrift stores, still working 3 part-time jobs to pay for my basic supplies. I would spend my weekends haunting estate sales, garage sales, and donation centers, searching for materials that others had deemed worthless. I developed an eye for quality, learned to spot real silk among the polyester, genuine leather among the vinyl. My senior thesis project was called Second Chances, a collection of 12 pieces, each one created entirely from second-hand and discarded materials. The centerpiece was a ball gown made from 7 different vintage dresses, each from a different decade, seamlessly blended into something completely new yet timelessly elegant. The night of the thesis presentation, I stood backstage, watching my classmates present their collections made from expensive fabrics purchased from high-end suppliers. When my turn came, I walked onto that runway wearing the centerpiece gown, and the audience fell silent. Then they erupted in applause. Professor Martinez, the head of the design department, approached me afterward with tears in her eyes. "Avalon, in 30 years of teaching, I have never seen anything like this. You have not just created fashion, you have created art. You have created a movement." But even with all the praise, even with the job offers that started coming in, I knew I was not ready yet. I was not ready to face Lydia and the others. I was not ready to prove my point. I needed to be better. I needed to be undeniable. So I took a job with a small sustainable fashion company in Portland, working for a designer named Vincent Cross who specialized in eco-friendly couture. He was demanding, perfectionist, sometimes cruel in his critiques, but he taught me things no school could teach. "Fashion is not about clothes," he would say, as I worked late into the night perfecting a seam. "Fashion is about transformation, about taking someone's vision of themselves and making it reality." I worked for Vincent for 3 years, learning every aspect of the business. I handled fabric sourcing, pattern making, client relations, even bookkeeping. But more importantly, I learned how to tell a story through clothing. During my lunch breaks, I would sketch my own designs, building a collection I called Redemption. Each piece was inspired by my journey, by the girl who had been mocked for her thrift store dress, by the woman she was becoming. The collection grew, piece by piece, month by month. I spent every extra dollar on materials, every free moment on construction. My tiny Portland apartment became a studio, with fabric samples hanging from every surface, sketches taped to every wall. Then one day, everything changed. I was working late at Vincent's studio when a woman walked in. She was tall, elegant, with silver hair and the kind of presence that demanded attention. I recognized her immediately. Isabella Winters, editor-in-chief of Ethereal magazine, one of the most influential fashion publications in the world. She was there to see Vincent's latest collection, but as she walked through the studio, her eyes kept drifting to my sketches, my fabric samples, the pieces of my own work that I kept tucked away in the corner. "Whose work is this?" she asked, picking up one of my sketches. "Oh, that is just." Vincent started to dismiss it, but Isabella held up her hand. "I was not asking you, Vincent. I was asking her." She turned to me, her piercing blue eyes studying my face. "This is your work, is it not?" I nodded, suddenly unable to speak. "Show me more." For the next hour, I showed Isabella Winters my entire Redemption collection. I told her the story behind each piece, the inspiration, the techniques I had developed, the message I was trying to convey. She listened without interruption, taking notes in a small leather journal, asking pointed questions about my process, my vision, my goals. When I finished, she closed her journal and looked at me for a long moment. "How many pieces do you have completed?" 15, I whispered. "I need 25 for what I have in mind." How long would it take you to create 10 more pieces at this level of quality? My heart was pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. What do you have in mind? Isabella Winters smiled. The first time I had seen her face soften since she walked in. New York Fashion Week, next spring. I want to sponsor your debut. The words hit me like lightning. New York Fashion Week. The dream of every fashion designer. The stage where careers were made or destroyed. I started, then stopped, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was offering. Think about it, Isabella said, handing me her business card. But do not think too long. Fashion Week waits for no one. That night, I called my mother. Mom, something incredible has happened. Through tears and laughter, I told her about Isabella, about the opportunity, about how my grandmother's lessons about making something beautiful from nothing had led me to this moment. Your grandmother always said that the best revenge is a life well lived, Mom said softly. Sounds like you are about to prove her right. The next 6 months were a blur of 18-hour days, bleeding fingers, and creative breakthroughs. I quit my job with Vincent, moved back home to save money, and turned our entire apartment into a design studio. I sourced materials from everywhere. Estate sales in wealthy neighborhoods, textile waste from manufacturing companies, vintage pieces from online auctions. Each fabric had to be perfect. Each embellishment had to serve the story. The collection evolved into something even more powerful than I had originally envisioned. It was not just about second-hand fashion. It was about second chances, about seeing beauty in the discarded, about transformation and redemption. The centerpiece was a gown that took me 3 months to complete. It was constructed from pieces of 13 different vintage dresses, ranging from the 1920s to the 1990s. But somehow, impossibly, it looked like it had been designed as one cohesive piece. The color story flowed from deep midnight blue at the hem to soft lavender at the bodice. A direct homage to my prom dress, but elevated to haute couture. 2 weeks before Fashion Week, Isabella came to see the completed collection. She walked through our tiny apartment, now transformed into a proper showroom, examining each piece with the critical eye of someone who had seen everything the fashion world had to offer. When she reached the centerpiece gown, she stopped breathing. Avalon, she whispered, reaching out to touch the intricate beadwork I had salvaged from a 1940s evening coat. This is museum quality. This belongs in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It belongs on the runway first, I said, surprised by my own confidence. Isabella laughed, a sound like silver bells. Yes, it does. Fashion Week arrived like a hurricane. The backstage area at Lincoln Center was chaos. Models being fitted, designers having nervous breakdowns, photographers capturing every moment of controlled panic. But I felt calm, eerily calm. I had been preparing for this moment my entire life, even before I knew it existed. My models were a diverse group of women, ranging in age from 18 to 60, representing different sizes, ethnicities, and backgrounds. I had specifically chosen models who brought their own stories to the garments. Women who understood what it meant to be underestimated, overlooked, dismissed. As the showtime approached, I stood at the side of the runway, watching the audience fill the seats. Fashion editors, celebrities, buyers, influencers, all the people who would decide whether my career lived or died in the next 15 minutes. And then, in the third row, I saw a face that made my blood freeze. Lydia Blackwood. She was older now, more polished, her hair styled in an expensive cut, wearing what was clearly a designer suit. But it was definitely her. The girl who had mocked my thrift store dress was sitting in the audience at my New York Fashion Week debut. For a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm me. All those years of work, all that growth and healing. And suddenly I was 17 again, standing in that ballroom, listening to cruel laughter. But then I remembered my grandmother's words, passed down through my mother. The best revenge is a life well lived. I straightened my shoulders, took a deep breath, and gave the signal for the show to begin. The first model stepped onto the runway wearing a reconstructed 1960s shift dress, transformed with hand-embroidered details and modern cutwork. The audience murmured appreciatively, but I could see they were still deciding how they felt about the collection. the second model, third, fourth, each piece building on the last, telling the story of transformation, of finding beauty in the discarded, of second chances. By the 10th piece, the murmur had become genuine excitement. Fashion editors were leaning forward, taking notes, snapping photos. And then the finale. The centerpiece gown appeared, worn by Elena Rodriguez, a 50-year-old model who had been told she was too old for fashion. Too real, too human. But in my gown, she looked like a goddess. The audience gasped, literally gasped, as Elena glided down the runway. The gown moved like liquid poetry. The vintage elements seamlessly integrated into something completely contemporary, yet timelessly elegant. When Elena reached the end of the runway, she paused, turned, and began the walk back. And then something magical happened. The audience rose to their feet, one by one, row by row, until the entire venue was standing, applauding, some with tears streaming down their faces. I stepped onto the runway for my designer bow, and the applause grew even louder. Cameras flashed like lightning, and I could see fashion editors frantically typing on their phones. But my eyes were locked on Lydia. She was standing with the rest, her face a mixture of shock, recognition, and something that looked almost like shame. Our eyes met across the runway, and I smiled. Not a triumphant smile, not a cruel smile, just a genuinely happy smile. The smile of someone who had found their purpose, their voice, their power. The after-party was a blur of congratulations, business cards, and interview requests. Fashion influencers wanted to collaborate. Boutiques wanted to carry my line. Magazines wanted to feature my story. But the moment that mattered most came at the end of the evening, as the crowd was beginning to thin, when a familiar voice called my name, Avalon. I turned to see Lydia approaching, her confident facade cracked, vulnerability showing through. She started, then stopped, clearly struggling with her words. I saw your show tonight. It was incredible. Truly incredible. Thank you, I said simply, waiting for her to continue. I need to tell you something. About prom night. About what I said. She took a shaky breath. I was horrible to you. Cool. And I have thought about it. About you. More times than I can count over the years. I studied her face, seeing the 18-year-old girl beneath the polished exterior, remembering that bullies are often people in pain themselves. We were kids. Lydia. We all did things we regret. No, she said firmly. Do not let me off the hook that easily. What I did was wrong. And seeing what you have become, what you have created, it makes me ashamed of who I was, who I still am sometimes. There was genuine remorse in her voice, real pain in her eyes. You know what the ironic thing is? I said softly. That night, that humiliation, it changed my life. It made me who I am. If you had been kind to me, if you had complimented my dress, I might never have found my fire. I might never have discovered my purpose. Lydia's eyes filled with tears. I do not deserve your forgiveness. Good thing forgiveness is not about what we deserve, I replied. It is about what we choose to carry forward and what we choose to leave behind. She nodded, unable to speak. The girl who wore that lavender dress. I continued. She is still part of me, but she is not afraid anymore. She is not ashamed. She is proud of where she came from, proud of what she has built, proud of every second-hand thread that brought her to this moment. The next morning, I woke up to discover that my phone had exploded with notifications. The fashion world was buzzing about my collection. Critics were calling it revolutionary, and orders were pouring in from boutiques around the world. But the message that made me smile the most was a text from Marcus Chen. My prom date from all those years ago. Saw your show online. Always knew you were destined for greatness. That lavender dress was just the beginning. Congratulations, Avalon. You did it. I was officially launched. Over the next year, my redemption collection became a phenomenon. Celebrities wore my pieces to red carpet events, always making sure to mention the sustainable, second-hand nature of the materials. Fashion students studied my techniques. Other designers began incorporating similar approaches into their own work. I opened my first boutique in Soho, A beautiful space where each piece came with a card telling the story of its materials, where the previous life of each fabric was celebrated rather than hidden. But more than the commercial success, more than the fame or recognition, what mattered most was the letters. Letters from young women who had been mocked for their thrift store finds, who had felt ashamed of their family's financial struggles, who had been made to feel less than because they could not afford designer clothes. Your story gave me courage, one letter read. I wore my thrift store dress to homecoming, and when someone made a comment, I told them about you, about how the most beautiful things often have the most interesting histories. Another. I am starting fashion school next year, and I want to follow in your footsteps. I want to show the world that creativity matters more than money, that beauty can be found anywhere if you know how to look for it. These letters reminded me why I had started this journey. It was never just about proving Lydia wrong, or showing up the mean girls from high school. It was about changing the conversation, about showing young women that their worth was not determined by their wardrobe, that their creativity was more valuable than their credit limit. 2 years after my Fashion Week debut, I received an invitation that made my heart skip a beat. Jefferson High School was having its 10-year reunion. For a moment, I considered not going. I had moved beyond that chapter of my life, beyond the need for validation from people who had treated me poorly. But then I realized, this was not about them anymore. This was about the girl I used to be, the one who had stood in that ballroom in her lavender dress, the one who had made a promise to herself under the stars. I decided to go. The reunion was held at the same hotel, in the same ballroom where prom had taken place. But this time, when I walked through those doors, everything was different. I wore one of my own designs, a stunning emerald green dress created from 5 different vintage pieces, perfectly tailored, elegantly understated yet unmistakably couture. The reaction was immediate. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Phones came out. Is that Avalon Reed? Someone whispered. The fashion designer? I heard she is worth millions now. She was on the cover of Vogue last month. But the moment that mattered most came when I spotted Lydia across the room. She looked good, successful, happy even. And when our eyes met, she smiled. Not the cruel smile I remembered, but a genuine, warm smile. She approached me, confidence mixed with humility in her step. Avalon, you look absolutely stunning. That dress is that one of your designs? It is, I said, doing a small turn to show off the intricate construction. Made entirely from vintage pieces, including some fabric from a 1950s prom dress. She laughed, understanding the significance. You never stopped making beauty out of other people's discards, did you? It is what I do best. We talked for a while, about our lives, our careers, our families. She had become a successful marketing executive, was married with 2 young daughters, seemed genuinely content with her life. I have to ask, she said as the evening was winding down, do you ever think about that night? About prom? I considered the question. Really considered it. I think about the girl I was that night. How hurt she was. How determined she became. I think about the promise she made to herself, and how that promise changed everything. Do you hate me for what I did? I looked at her. This woman who had once seemed so powerful, so intimidating, and I felt something I had not expected. Gratitude. Lydia, I need you to understand something. What you did that night, it hurt. It hurt more than you could possibly know. But it also saved me. It showed me who I did not want to be. And it gave me the fire to become who I was meant to be. She nodded, tears threatening to spill. The girl in the lavender dress, she was not weak. She was not less than. She was just beginning. And every cruel word, every laugh, every moment of humiliation, it all became fuel for something beautiful. I reached into my purse and pulled out a business card, but not my usual one. This was special, embossed with silver thread, elegant and understated. I have been thinking about expanding into children's fashion, I said, handing her the card. Teaching young girls that they are beautiful exactly as they are. That creativity and kindness matter more than designer labels. If you are interested, I would love to design something special for your daughters. Lydia took the card with shaking hands. You would, after everything, you would do that? The best revenge, I said, echoing my grandmother's words, is a life well lived. And the best life is one lived with generosity, creativity, and hope. As I drove home that night, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. From the thrift store where I found my prom dress, to the runway at Fashion Week, to this reunion where I had faced my past with peace instead of anger. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my mother. How did it go tonight? I have been thinking about you. About that scared girl in the beautiful lavender dress. About the woman she became. I am so proud. Not just of your success, but of your heart. Your grandmother would be too. I pulled over to respond, my eyes filling with tears as I typed. It went perfectly, Mum. The circle is complete. The promise is kept. And the best part is, this is just the beginning. Because that is the thing about second chances, about redemption, about turning pain into purpose. The story never really ends. It just gets more beautiful. Today, my fashion house employs over 200 people. We have boutiques in 12 cities around the world. We have dressed royalty, celebrities, and most importantly, everyday women who want to feel beautiful, confident, and authentically themselves. But in my office, hanging in a place of honor, is a simple lavender dress, carefully preserved, lovingly maintained, a reminder of where it all began. Sometimes young designers visit my studio, eager to learn the secrets of my success. They want to know about business plans, marketing strategies, industry connections. But what I always tell them is this. The most beautiful creations come from the most unexpected places. Do not be ashamed of your thrift store finds, your hand-me-downs, your makeshift solutions. Those are not limitations. Those are your superpowers. Every piece of fabric has a story. Every garment has a history. Your job as a designer is not just to make clothes. It is to honor those stories, to give them new life, to transform them into something even more beautiful than they were before. And most importantly, remember that fashion is not about excluding people. It is not about making anyone feel less than. True fashion, revolutionary fashion, is about inclusion, about showing the world that beauty comes in all forms, all prices, all backgrounds. The girl in the second-hand dress became a woman who changed the fashion industry. But more than that, she became someone who understood that our greatest wounds can become our greatest strengths, that our deepest shame can transform into our most powerful purpose, and that sometimes, the very thing that breaks us is exactly what we need to become who we were always meant to be. The laughter that once burned like acid now sounds like applause, and the dress they mocked became the gown that made history. If this story of transformation and triumph touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more inspiring true stories of people who turned their pain into power, their struggles into strength, and their dreams into reality. Your support helps us bring you more incredible journeys of human resilience and hope. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of dreamers, believers, and achievers. Together, we celebrate the extraordinary potential that lives within every single one of us.